I am the real daughter. In my past life, right after I came home, I was kidnapped along with the fake daughter. The kidnappers called my parents and my brother to demand a ransom. My brother was frantic and tried to comfort the fake daughter. Don't worry, I'll save you as soon as possible. The fake daughter was rescued successfully. But the kidnappers continued to demand a ransom. My brother sneered and said, causing such a ruckus right after coming home, we can't pay this ransom or everyone will think they can mess with our family. Call the police. And just like that, I was killed by the kidnappers out of spite. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the moment in my childhood and the human traffickers approached me. A lady asked, "Little girl, do you know the boy in this photo?" In my past life, I said he was my brother and got kidnapped. This time, I smiled slightly. "Auntie, that boy is over there. You should go find him. My name is Cindy. I was originally born into a prestigious family. My dad, Simon, married my mom, Wendy, an equally influential woman, forming a powerful alliance between the two families. I have a brother, Nick, who is 3 years older than me. Since birth, I like to follow him around while playing. Our happy family life was shattered by the kidnappers' arrival. That day, my brother and I were playing on a small slide in the park, while the nanny was busy on her phone. A strange aunt showed me my brother's photo and asked if I recognized him. I said he was my brother. This marked the beginning of the tragedy. To the kidnappers, it didn't matter which child they kidnapped as long as they could extort money from my parents. So, I was taken away. That day, I was tied up in an old warehouse, watching as the kidnappers called my family. They put it on speaker, and I heard my parents' anxious voices clearly. 30 million, not a cent less, or else. Okay, don't harm my daughter. We'll get the money immediately, my parents promised. But then, a naive child's voice interrupted. Mom and Dad, call the police. The teacher said we should find the police if there's trouble. Shut up. My parents must have worried that the kidnappers heard this, so they hung up quickly. That was my brother's voice. But it was too late, the kidnappers had already heard. The fierce man threw the phone down and cursed repeatedly. If they call the cops, we're in trouble. Sell the girl instead, she's worth a lot. Thanks to my brother, I was sold to a remote village and suffered greatly. When we met again 15 years later, my room at home had already been taken by Lucy, an adopted daughter. Later, in a deserted warehouse, both Lucy and I were kidnapped. The kidnappers demanded $50 million. One was their biological daughter who had just been found, the other, an adopted daughter they had raised for years. In theory, both could mean a lot. But they chose to rescue Lucy first without hesitation. When the kidnappers called, Nick frantically reassured Lucy, "I'll save you as soon as possible." So, they decided to pay $5 million to ransom Lucy first. The kidnappers, thinking they had the real daughter as the ultimate bargaining chip, agreed without hesitation. Once Lucy was freed, they changed their minds about the deal. I will never forget Nick's sneering face on the phone, causing such a ruckus right after coming home. We can't pay this ransom or everyone will think they can mess with us. Call the police. So, I was killed. No matter how many years passed, my brother remained just as detestable. Maybe it was fate that I wasn't meant to die. When I opened my eyes again, instead of hell, I found myself reborn. I returned to the moment before I was kidnapped. The human trafficker asked, "Little girl, do you know the boy in this photo?" I smiled slightly. "Auntie, that boy is over there. You should go find him." Nick was kidnapped instead. When the kidnappers called demanding ransom, I was seriously playing with my toys. While my parents were frantic, I heard the same threat I heard in my past life, 30 million, not a cent less, or else. This time, my parents' response was unchanged. "Okay, don't harm my son. We'll get the money immediately." I walked over, confused, tugging at my mom's clothes, and said loudly, "Mom, don't cry. Can't the police protect us?" The kidnappers, enraged, hung up. Clearly, my brother's fate would be worse than mine in my past life. Listening to the beeping on the other end, I silently wished, "Good luck, my brother." After the deal fell through, our family used all resources, and the media reported Nick's disappearance. But there was no news. How could there be? That isolated mountain village didn't even have a signal. The people used primitive tools like candles and shovels. Without finding Nick, my mom cried every day and developed depression. My dad had to pause his business. I had to pause my studies because they feared losing their last child. Time heals all wounds. With my company, my mom gradually recovered, and my dad came out of his gloom. It seemed everyone forgot about Nick, and everything was harmonious again. In the study, my dad suggested adopting another child. Thinking of the ungrateful Lucy, I firmly refused. Dad, I don't want to share your love with anyone. Besides, if Nick comes back one day, he wouldn't want his place taken. I'll guard this home for him and work hard on his behalf. My dad was taken aback, then patted my head, praising, Cindy, you're thinking long-term. Dad isn't as perceptive as you. Reborn, I had over 20 years of experience, making elementary school tasks seem easy. Everyone marveled that our family had a rare genius. My dad was proud, treating me as his treasure and the next successor, just like Nick in my past life. Reality proves that gender doesn't matter. My dad just needed someone to make him look good. In the blink of an eye, I turned 20. I went from being short and chubby to tall and graceful. Everyone at the company respects me. As the sole heir of the company, I am in the spotlight. Being a prodigy, I could find mistakes in documents when I was just in elementary school. By my 20th birthday, I had already led teams to complete dozens of outstanding projects. Wherever my father went, he took me along, showing off his incredibly talented heir. My mother was fawned over at wealthy ladies' tea parties because of me. Then one day, the police came to our door. The officer who worked on Nick's missing case years ago had become the deputy chief. He personally came over to inform my father that they had found Nick. He was at the police station. However, my father wasn't in a hurry to meet him. He even took the time to lecture me. He said, "Don't tell your mom yet, we need to confirm his identity first. Our family is large and powerful, not just anyone can enter. Cindy, be careful." This could be a plot from our rivals. Such grand words, everything seemed so reasonable. I looked down, pretending to be humble. "Dad, you're so thoughtful." My father thought he was being discreet, but I noticed. He investigated Nick's past, checking for criminal records and ensuring he had a clean slate before acknowledging him as his son. To my father, blood ties weren't as important as a pristine image. How laughable. But my show was about to begin. The guest hall of the villa witnessed a reunion after 15 years. Nick had spent those years in a remote village, working in the fields before dawn and doing laundry at night. He lived worse than a dog, barely getting enough to eat, sleeping in a pigsty, covered in heat rashes in summer, and frostbitten in winter. I knew these details because I had lived through them myself. Karma. This time it was Nick's turn. Seeing the housekeeper, Nick ran up excitedly. "Mom, I missed you so much. I dream of you every day." His real mother stood awkwardly to the side, unsure of what to do. I watched from the spiral staircase. After so long, how could Nick remember what his family looked like? No wonder he made a mistake. The housekeeper, earning $80,000 a month, dressed far more elegantly than some wealthy wives. Meanwhile, Nick looked awful in his cheap, patched clothes. From the moment he walked in, a faint stench filled the air. He looked older than our mother. My delicate mother covered her nose with a handkerchief and sneezed several times. My father's eyes showed disgust. He coldly said, "This is our housekeeper, not your mother. Can't you even recognize your own mom?" Nick, realizing his mistake, then rushed towards his mother. "Mom, you're so young and beautiful, I didn't dare to recognize you." Mother, moved to tears, cried, "Nick, my child, it's good that you're back." The mother and son hugged and cried their eyes out. I wiped fake tears from the corner of my eyes with a tissue. In the past life, Nick looked down on me and asked if a rat from a sewer had gotten into the house. He also claimed he only had one sister, Lucy. How could I let him off easy this time? I pretended to be ignorant and asked, "Dad, Mom, what's that weird smell in the house?" "It's Stinky." "Could it be something dirty?" "Might have some contagious virus." The butler, thinking he had failed in his duties, checked around and said, "There indeed is a smell, but I swear the cleaners thoroughly cleaned the house twice this morning and used air freshener." The housekeeper, who had been mistaken for Nick's mom, hesitated. No, it's not a virus, it's just Nick." Nick, feeling ashamed and humiliated, scowled at me, his eyes burning with anger. Mother stepped back slightly, then awkwardly tried to cover up. "My Nick has suffered. What kind of life has he led? We need to call a doctor immediately to examine Nick." Nick, in disbelief, looked at his mother, who had just been crying. "I am healthy, I don't have any viruses." Mother hesitated, but father directly ordered, "Get cleaned up first. We will have a doctor check you from head to toe tomorrow." The butler had prepared Nick's room and led him upstairs. I apologized. I turned your old room into my study, and it just got completed half an hour ago." Even if Nick was slow, he could sense my hostility. He blurted out, "Why did you take my room? Give it back." Father and mother looked upset, unable to believe their son would speak so rudely. I acted scared. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." Father stopped me, gently saying, "Cindy, you did nothing wrong, no need to apologize." He looked at Nick, disappointed. "It's just a room. There are plenty of rooms in the villa. Do we lack space for you? And you, arguing with your sister right away, where's your brotherly demeanor? Truly from the countryside." Father almost slipped up, quickly stopping, looking embarrassed. Nick, furious, stormed into a guest room, slamming the door loudly. On the day of our reunion, my long-lost brother left a terrible first impression. The next day, Nick had a full-body checkup. The results showed malnutrition, anemia, low blood sugar, and chronic gastritis. Thankfully, there were no major illnesses since he was young. The doctor prescribed some medicines and advised him to take care. Mother sighed in relief, then hugged her squeaky clean son, comforting him. I knew she spent hours scrubbing herself in the bathroom last night, afraid of catching something unclean. I wasn't surprised anymore. In the past life, when I came back, she did the same, even if we only held hands briefly. She would repeatedly scrub her hands, using the excuse of having a cleanliness habit. But in reality, I saw her tenderly wiping Lucy's mouth without any disdain. She just rejected an outsider returning home. Mom signaled me to come over. She sighed. Finally, our family of 4 is together again. Nothing can tear us apart anymore. Dad smiled at us, seemingly forgetting yesterday's argument. But I knew better, it was all just a facade. His gaze at Nick was always filled with scrutiny, as if wondering what benefits Nick could bring to the family. I suddenly said, "Actually, this should be a double celebration. I sponsored a girl but didn't get a chance to tell you all." Mom was surprised, while Nick reacted aggressively. He demanded impatiently, "What do you mean? I just got back and you're bringing someone else into the house?" His raised voice startled me. Dad frowned, displeased with Nick's somewhat crude behavior. "Nick, don't yell at your sister. This isn't the countryside. Let Cindy finish. You should know whose family." Mom quickly took Nick's hand to calm him down, worried that yesterday's scene might repeat. I signaled the housekeeper to bring the girl over. A skinny, short girl with a sallow face appeared in the villa. She looked like she came from the same world as Nick, even reeking with a similar unpleasant odor. Unlike her former glamorous self, without meticulous care, Lucy appeared timid and hesitant. It took me a lot of effort to find her in some orphanage. Funny thing, that place was near the village where I was abducted in my past life. The head of the orphanage, eager to show off other children, pointed me to the backyard quickly. There, I saw Lucy being beaten by others, her eyes dead and hollow. The head of the orphanage was indifferent and actively recommended other choices. "We have many smart kids here. That girl is eerie and hard to get along with." When Lucy saw me, her eyes lit up for a moment but quickly dimmed again. I pointed at her firmly. "Her. She looks quite pitiful. After all, she was part of the good show I prepared for my brother. Seeing a reflection of himself in Lucy, Nick was hostile. Sponsoring her is fine. But why bring her here? Bring her here? To fight fire with fire, of course. In the last life, the inseparable siblings had turned against each other. How dramatic and entertaining. Ignoring Nick's shouting, I explained to Dad, I've always wanted an older sister, and Lucy is around my age. We get along well. Now that Nick is back, it doesn't hurt to sponsor one more person. This way, no one will suspect his background. We all knew that suddenly announcing a new heir to the company would raise eyebrows. Mom glanced at Nick, conflicted, but this is unfair to Nick. Nick, enraged, pushed me. Cindy, what kind of sister are you? Can't stand your own brother? I stumbled backward but was caught by Dad. Nick scoffed, come on, I just pushed lightly. Cindy, what are you pretending for? Dad, furious, wanted to kick him. Enough. Don't come back just to make a mess like a dog. This is settled. Cindy has the big picture in mind, thinking for the company. What about you? You want our stock to fall, huh? Nick glared stubbornly at Dad, refusing to speak. Mom softened, acting motherly. How about this, let's not announce it publicly yet. Once the timing is right, we'll hold a grand banquet. We'll invite everyone and let them witness our long-lost son's return. Nick looked at Mom in disbelief, choking back tears. Even you don't want to acknowledge me? Mom avoided his gaze, clearly uneasy. I couldn't help but laugh. Wendy knew her affluent lifestyle depended on the company's success. She wouldn't dare harm its interests. Lucy tugged at my clothes, gazing at me earnestly. Cindy, you look like a princess. So beautiful. Can we be sisters? I've always dreamed of having a sister like you. I nodded, of course. From now on, you're part of the family. She hugged me excitedly, eyes filled with reliance. We felt like real sisters already. Everyone seemed relieved, except for Nick. His world was shattered. Mom got smart this time, instructing the housekeeper to take Lucy for a cleanup. She would officially join the family after health checks. A few days later, Lucy moved in. Eager to fit in, she dressed in the branded clothes from the closet, introducing herself confidently to our parents. Despite her nervousness, her confidence was impressive. Nick, however, sulked in his room, upset by the situation. Nick was staying in the guest room, while Lucy and I lived on the same floor, far from what he imagined. Whenever he saw her, he became wary, hiding his resentment poorly. A biological son lived further away than a sponsored outsider. His status was clear. The family planned a welcome dinner for Nick, and I suggested using fresh ingredients sent by overseas friends. The kitchen staff quickly processed the air-freighted king crabs, Wagyu beef, and more. In the grand dining hall, the Swarovski crystal chandelier cast a dazzling light. Chefs prepared exquisite dishes, serving them one by one. Nick, unfamiliar with the array of plates, cutlery, and bizarre napkins, didn't know how to start. Mom felt sad. Is the food not to your liking? Coming from nobility, she couldn't fathom anyone not knowing how to use such elaborate utensils. In the past, in that small village, a candle and basic cutlery were luxuries. Most ate with their hands. Nick pretended to be calm, trying to imitate me. But I purposely stayed still. So, he grabbed a glass of water and gulped it all down. Anyone would think he was a thirsty ghost. I kindly reminded, that's mouthwash, not for drinking. Nick looked embarrassed. In contrast, Lucy's manners were impeccable. Thanks to our days together, I had patiently taught her every dining etiquette. Dad glanced and remarked, the eldest son is not even as good as a girl. What a disgrace. Lucy shyly looked down and said gratefully, it's all because of Cindy's good teaching. At this, Nick angrily threw his fork down, shouting, shut up. What gives you the right to sit and eat with me? Lucy's face turned pale. She looked at me awkwardly, not knowing what to do. I knew how hard she had been trying to fit into this family over the past few days. Unfortunately, Nick would lose his temper as soon as he saw her, constantly emphasizing that she was an outsider. Under the table, I squeezed her hand secretly to comfort her. Dad frowned. Starting tomorrow, we'll hire an etiquette teacher to start from scratch. We can't afford this embarrassment in our family. His unintentional words struck a nerve. This comment was like flipping a switch. Nick flipped the dishes in front of him, shouting, "That's enough. I can't handle this etiquette stuff. You just want to embarrass me." Mom was stunned, trying to explain something. Nick pushed her away, shouting, "Hypocrite." I couldn't help but agree a little. Wendy boxed herself into the role of a mother, but she didn't do it well. It was all superficial concern seeing his wife being driven to tears by their long-lost son. Dad scolded, "Your mom once got depression because of you, and now you're doing this? You've been wild for so many years. Did your sense of duty get eaten by dogs? I am truly disappointed in you. You can't do anything right and lack even the basic moral decency." Dad sure knew how to push buttons. "I'm even more disappointed in you, Dad. You weren't like this before." Nick, initially acting on impulse, was now completely lost in his anger, rolling up his sleeves as though getting ready to fight. A big showdown seemed imminent. I sat by, munching on seeds and enjoying the show. But unfortunately, no fight broke out as Mom, trying to intervene, suddenly fainted. Dad quickly got her to her room to rest, and the scene was chaotic. The next few days, the house had a tense atmosphere. Nick hid in his room every day. Mom's attempts at concern were met with rejection, and she spent her days crying in secret. Dad, noticing the empty chair, huffed, "Country folks just can't blend in. It's humiliating." So, I suggested hiring an etiquette teacher. Professor William from the Etiquette Academy was an old stickler. Thus, Nick had to learn etiquette every afternoon, starting with basic dining manners. Lucy volunteered to join the lessons. Professor William swung his teaching baton like it had eyes. Any wrong movements and the two of them got hit. But I had prepped Lucy beforehand, and she did quite well. The better Lucy did, the worse Nick suffered. Even Professor William couldn't take Nick's poor performance and increased his punishment. After just one lesson, Nick went crying to Mom, "Mom, I don't want to learn etiquette anymore. It really hurts, I'll be beaten to death." Faced with her eldest son's cries, Mom softened immediately. "When we mingle with others, do you want our company to be mocked? If Lucy can do it, why can't you?" Dad definitively said, "Cindy's right about this. You shouldn't intervene to prevent Mom from softening again. I bought 2 plane tickets and sent them on a vacation." Nick cornered me when he found out, his eyes dark. "Cindy, don't think I don't know this was all you're doing. We'll see about this." He attempted to push me, but I dodged in time. He hit the railing instead, letting out a painful shriek, "Someone, help." Cindy pushed me. But no one would help him out right now. I laughed, "Scream all you want. No one's going to believe you." He probably didn't know this, but all the hallways have surveillance cameras, while the rooms don't. I doubt he even knows what surveillance is. Turns out, he really didn't know. He was foolish without realizing it. In the past life, Nick and Lucy had used these lowly tricks to frame me. Dad and Mom never cared about the truth. They assumed everything was my fault and punished me relentlessly. This time, Lucy stood with me. She stepped forward, her tone firm, "I can testify. Nick brought this upon himself." I studied seriously every time while Nick was always distracted. Nick slapped her hard, "Who do you think you are? Smart ass." He wouldn't dare hit me, so Lucy was his scapegoat. He used all his strength, making her face swell. She looked pitiful. She glared at Nick menacingly. I had no doubt that she'd hit back if I gave the signal. In a civilized world, we don't need to resort to violence. I pulled up the surveillance video on my phone and played it back in slow motion. Every frame was clear, showing exactly how Nick deliberately crashed into the railing. Nick stammered, I. Lucy grabbed my sleeve, pleading, "Cindy, please don't tell anyone about this." Nick knew she was using reverse psychology but still blustered, "Cindy, go on. But if you upset Mom, I won't take responsibility." Too bad, This trick didn't work on me. Didn't care about Mom's feelings. That night, I contacted Professor William to plan a more intense training schedule. Nick's lessons increased to 3 times a day, covering morning, noon, and night. He was in misery but had no choice. A few days later, Nick looked worse than when he first arrived. Lucy, on the other hand, made great progress and started to show some grace and poise. As Dad and Mom's trip was nearing its end, I switched back to a single afternoon lesson. Mom seemed oblivious, fussing over Nick's weary state. "Nick, why are you so tired? But you look quite stylish now." The stick method worked. At least Nick's basic manners were now up to par. Dad was reluctantly satisfied. He praised me. "Cindy, you're impressive. Your brother is lucky to have a sister like you." In my dad's words, all of this was thanks to me. I gladly accepted the compliment, even though all I did was talk, and responded with a big gesture. "It's what I should do." I even picked out more than 10 professors to tutor Nick. Nick's face turned black when he heard that. Holding back his anger, he forced a twisted smile and said, "That's too much trouble. Thank you, Cindy, but I really want to experience learning at school. Mom, Dad, it's always been my dream." Hearing this, my mom started crying again. "Fine, if my son wants to go, he can go. Any school is fine." I suggested, "How about going to a regular school nearby? That way, he won't have to worry about falling behind." My dad was thinking the same thing. Nick, terrified, rejected the idea multiple times. He had been tricked by me too many times lately. Every time Professor William got mad, I was always there, making penalties double with just a few words. Nick was in no mood to take my advice. He quickly said, "I'll just go to the same high school Cindy went to." If it weren't for that incident, it should have been my alma mater too. When he said that, his face showed some regret but also relief. Mom was so moved that she immediately called the principal to arrange 2 spots. Nick secretly gave me the middle finger, satisfied. But I was even more satisfied because at that high school, I had a bunch of enemies. I attended that elite school as a transfer student for a few months. The place had all kinds of people. There were repeaters who had been held back for years, gifted kids skipping grades, heirs from wealthy backgrounds, mean teachers, and arrogant security guards. Back then, I turned the whole school upside down, but they had no evidence against me. When I got bored, I just left and quickly finished school abroad, skipping grades. After a few years, the chances were high that the high school still had the same people. So now Nick and Lucy going in as transfer students meant we could predict their treatment. Sure enough, the butler had just dropped Nick and Lucy off at school in the morning, and by the afternoon, got a call from their homeroom teacher. Nick had a conflict with someone on the first day of school, got injured, and needed to rest at home. I asked the butler, was the person who hit him a redhead with piercings all over his nose, mouth, and ears? The butler was shocked and said yes. That guy, Bob, was the king of the repeaters, losing 2 front teeth because of me. He chased me every time he saw me. Nick broke 2 ribs and lost 4 front teeth. He was no match for Bob. My dad angrily questioned the homeroom teacher, but the surveillance showed Nick started the fight. He didn't manage to hit Bob and instead got taught a lesson. Lucy cried on the spot. I told Nick not to be so impulsive and not to fight, but he wouldn't listen. I tried to stop him, told him not to embarrass the family for my own good, but I couldn't hold him back. "It's all my fault." Lucy sobbed convulsively beside Dad, who got angrier. Bob claimed self-defense, saying he couldn't control his strength. Bob even asked Nick for full compensation for his losses. Anyway, starting a fight on the first day left a bad impression. The homeroom teacher suggested Nick rest at home until further notice. Putting it nicely, it was awaiting further notice, but it was actually a subtle way of kicking him out. So to my dad, Nick became an embarrassment, even worse than Lucy. Nick explained, "Dad, he called me a bastard child. He said really awful things. I couldn't take it." My dad slapped him, "Loser. My son can't even win a fight and gets played." Getting expelled on the first day was unacceptable for Dad. Nick, holding his slapped face, yelled, "But it's all your fault. If you acknowledged me from the start, I wouldn't be mocked as a bastard." Dad got so mad he wanted to kick him. Mom quickly saved the situation. "It's not that we didn't acknowledge you. We're preparing for the announcement." Nick got excited. "Really? A press conference announcing me as the sole heir to the company?" He was naive, skipping past Dad and erasing my inheritance rights. In reality, Dad held all the power, and most of the shares were in his hands, not allowing anyone to covet them. Even I didn't have much say. If nothing changed, Dad wouldn't give up control until his death. Coveting the company before Dad's death was a huge mistake for Nick. I even felt a hint of malice in Dad's eyes, but maybe that was just my imagination. Mom's face was awkward, and she dodged the topic with other words. But Nick didn't give up, pressuring Mom every day to agree. Their touching mother-son bond now had cracks and was on the brink of collapse. In his study, Dad asked me what I thought about the situation. How to deal with it wasn't a mystery to him, he just wanted to test me. Having known him all these years since my reincarnation, I knew what he wanted to hear. I said seriously, "It's too early to discuss inheritance, Dad. You're in great shape. You can easily work until you're 90. As for Nick wanting to go public so quickly, we could claim he's the butler's son. That way, we won't damage the company's image and will even enhance your reputation." Dad laughed heartily. "Exactly. No wonder you're my proud daughter. We're on the same page." Mom, worried about being mocked by her group, pretended to know nothing. On the day of the banquet, many socialites and politicians showed up at the old house. With Nick eagerly anticipating, the announcement time came. Holding the microphone, Dad declared that Nick was the butler's long-lost son, and he would treat him as his own. Nick would receive yearly stock dividends, similar to my benefits. Nick's expected title as son turned into butler's son, and his inheritance reduced to dividends, not even close to being the same. Naturally, Dad also acknowledged Lucy alongside him. Lucy was a girl I sponsored, also adopted as a foster daughter, hoping the three siblings would get along. Nick, furious, knocked over the champagne tower and yelled hysterically, "Nonsense, I'm Nick, the long-lost eldest son and the next heir to the group." Everyone around pretended ignorance, though they knew the truth. But Lucy, unlike Nick, was sensible and obedient. "Thank you, Father. Becoming your foster daughter and joining this family is the biggest blessing of my life." When Dad heard this, he furiously pointed his finger at Nick, getting even angrier. "I decided to adopt you because I felt sorry for you. Don't take it for granted." They truly were like father and son, no one could out-talk the other, and soon they began fighting. The nice party instantly turned into a brawl scene. People around didn't dare watch the commotion for too long and quickly found excuses to leave. "Stop it, stop fighting. What a disaster. What's all this mess about?" Mom tried to intervene, but she couldn't hold them back. I turned on my phone and secretly recorded the fight, planning to use it as a funny video to amuse myself later. In the end, Dad couldn't beat my brother and was narrowly defeated. In a fit of rage, he ordered Nick to be thrown out, threatening that anyone who tried to intervene would be kicked out as well. Nick clung to the door frame, refusing to let go. "Why should I go? If anyone should leave, it should be Lucy. She's the outsider, not part of this family." Dad locked all the doors and windows on the spot, preventing any chance of Nick breaking in. I whispered to Lucy, "Nick is really scary, like a savage. If you were my real sister, we would get along so well and avoid such disgrace." As expected, Lucy seemed deep in thought after hearing my words. Mom held my hand and pleaded, "Cindy, help your brother. He just got back. Where will he stay if he's kicked out?" She wasn't this anxious when I was taken hostage before. I nonchalantly pulled my hand back and explained, "Dad is really mad right now. Saying anything will only make it worse. It's better to wait a bit before bringing it up again. I'll take someone to find brother later. Don't worry, nothing will happen to him." Mom sighed in relief and went back to her beauty sleep. Someone else might have suggested going together, but not Mom. That's just how she is. She has motherly love, but not much. The butler and I walked down the mountain road and found Nick quickly. When he saw the butler, he looked hopeful. "Dad sent you to get me, right?" I knew he'd regret it. I tossed him a card. "Mom gave you this for living expenses. Stay out for a while." Nick's expression froze. "What do you mean? Can't I go back to my own home?" "I get it now. You're lying. This is all your scheme, you wicked woman." The butler stepped in to stop his attack. "This has nothing to do with Miss Madam gave you the card out of concern." Nick kicked the butler. "Get lost. You're all in cahoots." He didn't forget to take the card before leaving and threatened, "I'll get rid of you two one day, just watch." I looked forward to seeing his reaction when he found out the password on the card was wrong. It would be priceless. After Nick left, the house was quiet all of a sudden. Mom occasionally mentioned brother's name, missing him when she saw things that reminded her of him. "Cindy, your dad should be calm by now. Why don't you bring Nick back?" I didn't want to face Nick's ugly attitude. "The company has been busy lately, maybe Lucy could go get him." Lucy eagerly agreed. Yet, we didn't hear back from her by nightfall. She vanished, taking Nick with her. I was reminded of kidnappings when we got the call from the kidnappers. You can't always get away with doing bad things. The tables can turn unexpectedly any day. The kidnappers somehow found out about brother's identity and demanded $50 million, or you'll get a corpse. The house turned chaotic because of the call. $50 million, which is almost 300 million yuan, isn't something you can instantly withdraw from the bank. Mom cried, "Let me at least see Nick first. Is he hurt?" The kidnappers put the phone on speaker, and Nick's terrified voice came through, "Mom, Dad, save me, please." Parents were solely concerned about brother, and I ended up comforting Lucy. "Sister, don't worry. I'll rescue you as soon as possible." The call ended abruptly, and the kidnappers gave us half an hour to prepare. Dad came to discuss a plan with me. I suggested, "How about this, let's use a few million to first get Lucy back. Then, we can use the time difference to notify the police and catch the robbers." Mom cried, "Can't we get Nick back first? He's our real family." I bitterly shrugged, "But we can't get brother back with just a few million. We don't have that much liquid cash at home. Time was of the essence. The longer we delayed, the more danger they'd be in. Lucy was just a sponsored member, so rescuing her first would be easier. This move would show the kidnappers were serious about paying." After hearing my explanation, Dad decided to go with this plan. Half an hour later, we proposed using our available cash to get Lucy back first. Only after ensuring her safety would we gather more money. The kidnappers agreed without much hesitation. Nick was their trump card, after all. Minutes later, we received an anonymous text and found the unconscious Lucy in the suburbs. She was dirty, but a check revealed only minor scrapes. It showed the kidnappers hadn't harmed her. Mom's worry eased a bit. The kidnappers called again. "This time, it's $50 million to get your precious son back. You have 3 hours. Dad's face turned grim. Even he couldn't come up with that amount so quickly. I suggested, "Let's pretend we don't care much about brother and offer them a maximum of 10 million instead." We never publicly revealed brother's identity, and the robbers couldn't be 100% certain about it. Mom hesitated, but Dad looked pained. "We have no choice. Notify the butler to contact the police." When the kidnappers called back, I couldn't help but chuckle. He's caused such a stir just as he got home. We can't pay the ransom, otherwise, everyone will think they can bully us. Nick shouted on the other end, and the call was cut off in haste. We lost track of brother, and he might have even been at risk of being killed. The butler rushed in. "The police are already on it." They immediately sealed off all city exits and started a thorough search in the area where we found Lucy. I firmly stated, the kidnappers wouldn't dare to kill him. Without a hostage, they'd have no way out. Nick would probably survive, but in what condition, I couldn't say. Maybe missing a limb or an organ, but alive nonetheless. Mom tried to stay calm but soon fainted. The police searched almost the entire city with no results. They speculated the kidnappers were hiding in an unmonitored underground area, probably the sewer system. But the underground areas of the city are complex and searching is no small task. I received various clues collected by the butler and, combined with my previous experience of being kidnapped, I had a general direction in mind. I circled a few places on the digital map and sent it to the police. Did you guys check these spots? Especially the ice cream wholesale store next to the police station. It's been empty for years and I heard it was just rented out recently. There's that saying, right? The most dangerous place is the safest place. The police focused their search around where Lucy was found, particularly those abandoned warehouses. But in reality, the kidnappers might have been coming and going right under our noses. Following this lead, they found the kidnappers in the underground cold storage of the ice cream shop, along with a barely alive Nick. In just a few days, Nick had been tortured beyond recognition. His ribs were broken in 6 places, the tendons in his hands and feet were severed, and he had lost a few teeth. His whole body was covered in injuries. When he was discovered, the kidnapper was venting his anger, stabbing a knife into Nick's left kidney. Doctors had to perform an emergency unilateral nephrectomy, put several internal fixations on his ribs, and reconnect his severed tendons. As for his teeth, they would have to wait until he woke up for implants. Nick was rescued. After months of hospital rehabilitation, Nick had become a different person when I saw him again. Back home, our mother hovered around him constantly, making nourishing soups with ginseng and bird's nest every day in the kitchen. Out of guilt, our father also granted his every request. He found a chance to corner me. Are you satisfied now? I innocently replied, of course I'm satisfied that you're back safely. Nick's face twisted and turned. Cindy, you should have been the one kidnapped. I'm like this all because of you. You've been reincarnated too, haven't you? In the previous life, you were killed by the kidnappers, and you held a grudge in your heart, so you deliberately set me up. It seemed Nick remembered everything from our past life. I didn't expect he'd recall these things to give my reincarnation more meaning. Dropping my innocent act, I looked him straight in the eye for the first time since my reincarnation. Nick, people get what they deserve. Everything that's happened to you now is deserved. I didn't arrange for the kidnappers to take you. At most, I just repeated things you've said. Right? Our family isn't to be messed with. Nick had nothing more to say to that and walked away in a huff. I readied myself for battle. That night, Nick couldn't wait to tattle with a voice recorder. Dad, Mom, Cindy knew where the traffickers took me and knew about the kidnappers from the start. She refused to save me on purpose. She's so venomous. Keeping someone like her in the family is a disaster. However, I didn't even need to explain. Our father immediately tossed the recorder aside. Nick, did someone knock your brains out? Reincarnation, hilarious. Our mother looked disappointed. Nick, Cindy worked herself to the bone trying to save you, and you don't feel a bit of gratitude, only resentment? Nick was dumbfounded. A few days later, he gathered more evidence, trying to prove I was evil. But our parents didn't even look at it before tossing it all into the shredder. Nick broke down, his disfigured face twisted ferociously, like a demon crawling out of hell. Cindy, the favorite son, couldn't possibly end up like this. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Nick, you just realized what our parents are like now? Reincarnation means nothing to them. You're just a cripple now. But I'm different. I'm the next heir, their proud and excellent daughter. That alone outweighs your so-called evidence. Seeing he couldn't shake me, Nick tried to rally our sister Lucy from the past life to join him against me. But he miscalculated. Lucy saw him as a great threat and naturally gave him no face. After repeatedly hitting walls, Nick seemed to lose hope and accept the situation. Former loyal siblings turned enemies. Lucy secretly came to me, saying she didn't believe a word of Nick's story. So all the servants knew that ever since Nick came back, he had lost his mind, spouting crazy talk every day. I suggested to her, how about you pretend to believe him, and we'll expose his true colors together. Lucy readily agreed. In the study, Nick produced a box of thick files. Lucy can vouch for me. In the past life, she was Cindy's sister, and the one kidnapped was Cindy. I should inherit the company, and Cindy, that bitch, should be kicked out. I feigned hurt. Big brother, just how much do you hate me to curse me to death every day? When you were kidnapped, everyone tried their best. It's really no one's fault, only the kidnappers. If I could predict the future, I wouldn't have been killed in the past life, right? Nick was livid. Stop your nonsense. The evidence is clear. What else do you have to say? Under his hopeful gaze, Lucy said, Nick's mind is really gone. He even deliberately hit Cindy before. It's all on the surveillance footage. With my encouraging look, Lucy produced a video from their etiquette classes showing Nick's behavior. Turning to me, she said, Cindy is so kind. Nick, how can you conspire against her relentlessly just to inherit the company? Nick's expression froze. Lucy, in our past life, I treated you so well and saved you first when things went south. How can you do this to me? Lucy coldly replied, lunatic. Our father was tired of the endless dramas since Nick was discharged. There hadn't been a peaceful day at home. He ordered the butler, Nick's bewitched. Take him to the house in West Suburb. Don't let him out without my order. Our mother wept, Nick, get well first. Come out when you're better. Clearly, in this life, everyone was on my side. I smiled at him, mouthing, I won. Lucy pointed at him, Nick's gone mad. Cindy, be careful not to get hurt. Nick burst into wild laughter, then broke down into weeping on his knees. I'm not crazy, you all are. Then he pulled out a knife, pointing it at our father, threatening, first, give me the company. Second, banish Cindy and Lucy from the city forever. Or I'll kill everyone. Our mother screamed in terror. Now I believe Nick had truly gone mad. Driven mad. Our father motioned for the butler to act while soothing Nick's emotions. Put the knife down first. We can talk. But Nick might be mad, but he wasn't stupid. When the butler approached, Nick noticed immediately. He started swinging the knife wildly. Don't come any closer, or I'll kill someone first. No one dared to make a move. Nick slowly advanced towards his father, the knife glinting. Nearby, Lucy saw things weren't looking good. She shoved me forward and tried to make a run for it. I fell to the ground, and the next second, the butler grabbed me and protected me behind him. My father pulled my mother back behind the table. In a fit of rage, Nick turned and stabbed Lucy. Run? Run where, Lucy? I treated you so well in the past, and you betray me like this. It's all your fault, you bitch. Lucy screamed in agony. The sound mixed with Nick's hysterical laughter, creating a huge commotion. At the critical moment, security arrived and subdued Nick. And that was the end of it. Having narrowly escaped with our lives, my parents hugged me tightly, relieved. Thank God he didn't stab my precious daughter. Nick was sentenced to life in prison for attempted murder and attempted escape. Naturally, my father had a hand in this. He was afraid that letting a murderous son out would leave an indelible negative impact on the Cindy family. Neither my parents nor I visited him in prison. Not once. As for Lucy, she had pushed me in the critical moment and ended up being the one stabbed by mistake. Serves her right. By the time she was taken to the hospital for treatment, it was too late. She didn't die, but she ended up paralyzed from the waist down, incontinent, and was sent to a nursing home. She had to use a colostomy bag for the rest of her life. My mother was furious. That woman is so vicious. We treated her so well, and she turned out to be such an ingrate. Years later, my mother's health declined, and my father retired early. I took over the family business. To expand the market, I chose to settle overseas, far from the old house. The company became internationally renowned, a place where countless people scrambled to get a job. From then on, my future looked bright.